Mercedes just lost Miami, and the craziest part is, they haven't been disqualified yet. Because the FIA has now confirmed irregularities on the car that just dominated the race. Not rumors. Not speculation. Confirmed. A team that brought almost no upgrades, still beating faster rivals. A driver reporting technical problems, still pulling away under pressure. And a strategy so precise, it left McLaren with zero chance to respond. Now imagine this. Take away that result, and the championship lead changes instantly. That's how big this is. And if the FIA takes the next step, this won't just be a controversy. It will be one of the biggest disqualifications in modern Formula One history. At first, nothing about Miami felt illegal. It felt controlled. Antonelli's race wasn't clean, it wasn't easy, and it definitely wasn't comfortable. He lost positions right at the start, dropping into the chaos of Turn 1, surrounded by rivals who had nothing to lose. For a moment, it looked like the race was slipping away. But then something changed. Lap by lap, he started coming back. Passing Ferrari, fighting McLaren, closing in on the leaders like the pressure didn't exist. And that's already unusual, because recovering through that kind of traffic usually destroys your tires, your rhythm, your entire race. Yet somehow, it didn't. And this is where the first crack appears. Because while Antonelli was fighting through the field, something else was happening in the background. Mercedes was preparing something very specific. Not a risky move. Not a desperate gamble. A perfectly timed decision. Lap 27. They bring him into the pits earlier than expected. Fresh tires go on, he pushes immediately, and gains just enough time to create an opportunity. One lap later, McLaren reacts, bringing Norris in to cover the move. But it's already too late. That one lap, just one, is enough to flip the race completely. Now Antonelli is ahead. Clean air. Control. From that moment on, the race is his. And on paper, everything makes sense. That's strategy. That's Formula One at its best. But here's where things stop being simple. Because that strategy only works if the car behind it is performing exactly right. Tires need to switch on instantly. The engine needs to deliver power smoothly. Energy deployment has to be precise. Balance has to stay stable through every corner. It's like opening a door at the exact right second, but only if everything behind that door is already perfectly aligned. And this is where the contradiction begins. Because later in the race, Antonelli reports problems. Not small ones. Gearbox issues. Throttle response not behaving correctly. The kind of issues that normally cost drivers tenths every lap, sometimes much more. But his pace doesn't drop. The gap doesn't collapse. Norris stays close, but never gets the chance to attack. And that's the moment where people inside the paddock start paying attention. Because a car with problems shouldn't behave like that. A car under pressure shouldn't look that stable. And a team that brought almost no upgrades shouldn't be controlling the race against faster rivals. At first, it feels like excellence. Then it starts to feel like something else. Because when too many things work perfectly, even when they shouldn't, that's when Formula One stops asking how they did it. And starts asking, what are they not showing? And this is where the tension explodes beyond the race itself. Because once those questions start inside the paddock, they don't stay quiet. Other teams begin to look closer. Not at the result, but at the details behind it. McLaren was the first to feel it. They had the pace. Over long runs, they were right there with Mercedes. Norris stayed within reach almost the entire race, close enough to apply pressure, but never close enough to attack. And that's a very specific kind of frustration. It's not being slow. It's being blocked by something you can't fully explain. Because if you're faster, even slightly, there should be a moment. A mistake, a weak corner, a chance to get alongside. But that moment never came. And that's what starts to bother engineers. Because in Formula One, performance always leaves clues. If a car is faster, you see it on the straights. If it's better in corners, you see it in the data. But when the advantage doesn't clearly show in one area, and yet the result stays out of reach, that's when suspicion grows. Ferrari's situation makes it even worse. They arrived in Miami with the biggest upgrade package of any team. 11 separate updates, all designed to transform their season. And still, they finished outside the fight for the win. Now imagine that. You bring everything. New parts, new ideas, weeks of development. And you're still behind a car that barely changed. That doesn't just hurt performance. It challenges understanding. Because now the question isn't just what Mercedes did right. It's what everyone else is missing. Even Red Bull, a team used to setting the standard, found themselves stuck in the same pattern. Close enough to stay relevant, but never close enough to control the race. And when three top teams all reach the same invisible wall, that wall becomes the story. This is where the FIA steps in with real weight. Because Formula One doesn't wait for public accusations. When patterns don't make sense, when performance raises more questions than answers, the governing body starts digging. Quietly at first. Looking at data. Reviewing components. Checking systems that don't usually get attention. And this is exactly the kind of situation that triggers deeper inspection. Not because something obvious is wrong, but because something subtle might be. And here's the key detail. The irregularities that have now been confirmed were not visible during the race. They didn't appear as a failure. They appeared as an advantage. That's what makes this dangerous. Because advantages built in gray areas are the hardest to detect, and the most impactful when they are. Think of it like a door that's slightly open. From the outside, everything looks normal. But inside, someone has access that others don't. That's what the FIA is trying to determine right now. Was Mercedes simply better? Or were they operating in a space others couldn't see? And the moment that question becomes official, everything shifts. Because now, it's no longer about performance. It's about legality. And once legality is questioned, the consequences stop being theoretical. They become immediate. Because if the FIA decides that those irregularities cross the line, even by the smallest margin, the result doesn't get debated. It gets removed. And suddenly, Miami isn't a victory anymore. It's evidence. And this is where everything starts to collapse, from the inside. Because once a race becomes evidence, the pressure doesn't stay outside the team. It moves straight into the garage, into the engineers' meetings, into every single decision being made behind closed doors. Mercedes is no longer just preparing for the next race. They are reviewing everything. Every system used in Miami. Every setting. Every detail that could be questioned. Because now, it's not about going faster. It's about proving they were legal. And that changes the entire dynamic. Imagine building something that works perfectly, and then being told to explain exactly why it works, knowing that one small detail could invalidate everything. That's the situation. Because the FIA doesn't need a massive violation. They need one clear breach. One interpretation that crosses the line. And suddenly, the entire result is gone. Now here's where it gets even more intense. If something is found and confirmed as illegal, the impact doesn't stop at Miami. It spreads. Because the first question the FIA will ask is simple. When did this start? Was it only in Miami? Or was it there in Australia, in China, in Japan? The races that built Antonelli's championship lead. And that's the nightmare scenario. Because if the same system, the same irregularity, existed before, then you're not talking about one disqualification. You're talking about multiple results under review. Points disappearing. Standings shifting. An entire season being rewritten. Now think about the psychological impact inside the team. Drivers feel it. Engineers feel it. Even leadership feels it. Because every success suddenly carries doubt. Antonelli's victory in Miami was supposed to be the moment that defined him. The race where he proved he could handle pressure, recover from chaos, and still deliver under the most difficult conditions. But now, that moment is under a shadow. Because if the car is not fully compliant, then the performance gets questioned. Not erased emotionally, but challenged officially. And in Formula One, that distinction matters more than anything. Because records don't remember how it felt. They remember what was legal. Meanwhile, rivals are watching this unfold very carefully. McLaren knows they were close. Close enough that if anything changes, even slightly, they could take control in the next race. Ferrari knows their upgrades didn't work, but now they also know something else. The gap might not be as real as it looked. And Red Bull, they see opportunity. Because when a dominant team is forced to adjust, even a little, it creates a window. A small one. But enough. And that's why the next decision from the FIA is so critical. Because it won't just confirm what happened in Miami. It will define what happens next. If Mercedes is cleared, they become even stronger. A team that survived scrutiny and kept winning. But if they're not, then everything changes overnight. The championship resets. The pressure flips. And the team that looked untouchable becomes vulnerable. Which leads to the final, unavoidable question. Was Miami the peak of Mercedes' dominance? Or the moment it all started to fall apart? And this is where everything finally comes together. Because the Real story was never just the race. It was never just the strategy. It was never just Antonelli holding off Norris under pressure. It was what made all of that possible, at the same time. Think about it. A car that wasn't clearly the fastest, still controlling the race. A driver reporting mechanical issues, still delivering consistent pace. A team bringing minimal upgrades, still outperforming rivals who brought everything. And now, confirmed irregularities. Individually, each of those details can be explained. Together, they point in one direction. An advantage that didn't fully belong on track. That's the piece that was missing from the beginning. Because Miami wasn't just a great performance. It was a perfectly aligned outcome. Everything working exactly when it needed to. Too exactly. And in Formula One, when performance looks that precise under pressure, it usually means one thing. There's something underneath it. Something engineered not just for speed, but for control. Now, that doesn't automatically mean intent. It doesn't automatically mean cheating. But it does mean this. Mercedes found something. Something powerful enough to maintain performance even when things went wrong. Something stable enough to resist pressure from a car that was just as fast. Something subtle enough that it didn't raise alarms immediately. Until now. Because once the FIA confirms irregularities, the interpretation becomes everything. Was it a clever solution inside the rules? Or a step beyond them? That's the line that decides everything. And history in Formula One is very clear about this. The biggest advantages often live right on that edge. Double diffusers. Flexible wings. Fuel flow systems. All of them started as innovations. All of them ended in controversy. Some stayed legal. Others didn't. And the difference between those two outcomes is what defines entire championships. That's exactly where Mercedes is standing right now. Right on that edge. If the FIA rules in their favor, this becomes a masterclass. A team that understood the regulations better than anyone else and used that understanding to dominate. But if the decision goes the other way, then Miami becomes the turning point. The race that exposed everything. The moment where dominance turns into doubt. And possibly, into penalty. Because disqualification doesn't just remove a result. It changes perception. It changes momentum. It changes how every rival approaches the rest of the season. And suddenly, Mercedes is no longer the team everyone is chasing. They become the team everyone is questioning. So when you look back at Miami, the chaos at Turn 1, the undercut on lap 27, the pressure from Norris, the technical issues that somehow didn't slow the car down. It all connects. Not as separate moments, but as pieces of the same puzzle. A puzzle that is only now being fully revealed. And the final piece is still in the hands of the FIA. Because until that decision is made, one truth remains. We don't actually know if Mercedes won that race. Or if we just watched the moment that victory started to disappear.